I'm going to be providing a little bit of background to a recent report done on LGBT asylum seekers in South Africa. It was a review of refugee status denials involving sexual orientation and gender identity. The report was published in April this year. What we found quite often is that when talking about LGBT refugees and asylum seekers to state officials, there's often a sense that these are duplicitous claims, and because these claims are often denied, when we say, you know, such and such happened to this person who was claiming, the state official often says, well, obviously they would tell you that story because they're desperate to get asylum. So there's a kind of cycle of duplicitousness involved in these asylum claims, a perceived cycle. So one of the things we wanted to do was to find another way of providing evidence for the ways in which people claiming on the basis of sexual orientation in South Africa experience the asylum system. So over 10 years, we collected a series of refugee denial letters. So these are letters provided by refugee status determination officers to asylum seekers, giving them a supposed reason for the denial of their claim. So we collected 67 letters from 65 individuals. The 2 extra letters were appeals. These were collected from 5 legal and paralegal clinics that work with refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa. We attained full and informed consent from the clients regarding the use of their letters. The decisions are made in the last 10 years, as I said, and it shows the work of at least 32 status determination officers. 45 of the applicants identified as male and 20 identified as female. And notably, these are not the identifications of the applicants themselves, but rather what the determination officer wrote in the letter to the applicant. Of course, we know the majority of my work in particular is with transgender and gender diverse persons. We know that those people are seeking asylum, not only in South Africa, but in Southern Africa. We've heard of claims by trans people in Botswana and Zambia. And in both cases, these claims were denied because the state said that they actually don't provide for these kinds of claims. The sample that we have covers Uganda, Zimbabwe, Cameroon, the DRC, Malawi, Kenya, Tanzania, Jordan, Nigeria, Sudan, and Zambia. Now, I think what's important about the report is that South Africa, and this appears in the kind of language in other countries where these claims happen, South Africa extends protection to LGBT people through internal legislation. So it's not provided for by the UNHCR or through international protection, which is the case we see in Kenya, Morocco, Senegal, Tanzania, where we see parallel legal systems and the UNHCR providing kind of international protection, even though local laws continue to criminalize these populations. In South Africa, we see the convention being read into the Constitution and then into the Refugees Act. The report shows that regardless of this, there are clear issues of religious and cultural prejudice that remain as barriers, and that from the ways in which some claims are spoken to the perception that because some countries of origin are Christian countries, that it's impossible that someone could be gay and seeking asylum from that country because there could be no gays in that country. At the most extreme end, those seeking asylum told us of experiences where they had a Bible brought out in the actual reception office and were pointed out paragraphs which pertained to their claim that meant that they were sinful, and this was not actually about the claim itself. But overall, the denial letters show kind of disdain, apathy, deep-seated prejudice, and a very bizarre understanding of what these claims mean. So in one instance, a quite well-known case, a claimant was told he experienced a sexual assault when he was younger, and he wrote about the assault as something that really damaged him. In the letter, the determination officer actually says that he could not be gay because if he was gay, he would have enjoyed the sexual assault. So what we see is a disconnect between frontline officers and the ways in which the Refugees Act is laid out, as well as the ways in which guidance notes and guidelines and the convention itself suggests that these matters should be managed. We also see a confusion between, so all evidence for almost all of the letters, the evidence used was evidence which would generally apply to gay men, which means lesbians who have particular situations, lesbians who arrived with children, all of the information applied to them in their letters actually pertained to gay men. We also found that a number of the letters simply cut and paste information from Wikipedia. In instances, in one particular instance, it was quite clear that the Wikipedia entry that was the claimant was from the Central African Republic. The Wikipedia entry was from the DRC, and the official had forgotten that the claimant was from the Central African Republic and thought she was from Cameroon, and so just changed the DRC to Cameroon throughout. What this suggests on our reading is that, as we, I think by this point well know, the Global South remains host to the vast majority of queer refugees, many of whom remain undocumented. We know that we have an increasingly difficult situation, which is quite visible in places like Kenya and off the African continent, the Mexico border. That these are the kinds of situations where queer people are remaining in the Global South, that the convention, the guidelines and the guidance notes didn't ever really envision the Global South as a site of refuge. At the same time, and I think Tina's going to speak a little bit to that, we see in the compacts that there's an imagination of the Global South, but there is no mention, and therefore we could argue no imagination of LGBTI people actually seeking asylum. What this translates to then is the absence of clear and applicable guidelines and guidance that works in the space in which these officers are working. And we see the outcomes of this in the development of, for instance, in South Africa, the new Refugees Act and regulations, which suggests that anyone who has a criminal record would not be able to apply for asylum. At the same time, almost all the countries that I mentioned in the first slide criminalize LGBT people, and many of the people that are seeking asylum actually can and might well do have criminal records because they have been arrested on this basis. We know, for instance, that in Kenya at the moment, we're seeing a difficulty with the attention between the UNHCR providing international protection and then refugees who are LGBT being arrested and receiving criminal records because of their arrest on the basis of infringing upon what is perceived to be the penal code. And then because they have that criminal record, the international protection has to be rescinded at that point because there is no option of resettlement for someone with a criminal record. So in two ways, we're seeing international documents that are meant to assist and pertain to this group of people actually just not imagining their existence. I'm going to stop there. That was a brief overview of what the report does. I think I'm going to drop the report, a link to the report in the chat. And this is just some of the work that we do as the network and some of our publications, if anyone is more interested in the situation for LGBT refugees on the African continent. Thank you.